Welcome into Outkick the Show. I am your fearless leader. It is now 2019, and your boy had to shave his beard off because Marcus Mariota didn't play. The result, I have a spectacular stash that I'm going to be rocking all week long, baby. You want to know where you can come hang out? Get the hottest of hot sports takes and get the best Colombian Coke anywhere in the universe. This guy's got you covered, doubling as a drug dealer this week as well as a sports and more commentator. Appreciate you guys all coming to hang out with me at the start of 2019. My name is Clay Travis. This is Outkick the Show, presented by Sportsbook Review. We got 11 different games going on down the stretch of the NFL playoffs. We got the title game out in Santa Clara between Alabama and Clemson. We got LSU winning a national title by beating Central Florida. Texas whipping the crap out of Georgia. What did we learn from that game? The South completely dominating college football, and much going on in the world of sports. But we began with, as I said before, if you are listening on podcast, do yourself a favor. Go check out Facebook. Go check out YouTube. Go check out Periscope. By the way, if you miss one of these shows, they are all now indexed on YouTube. You type in Clay Travis, there are hundreds of Outkick the shows that you can go marinate in. You can go watch. You can go make sure if you're only watching today and you're like, I want to remember what Clay Travis looked like with a beard. Just so you know, facial hair moves here. Mustache all week. Saturday I'm flying to California. I'm going to go back to the beard, I think, while I'm out in California. We'll allow it to come back on. And so all of that will be taking place. But I want to hit hard at the opening story that has transfixed the left-wing sports media universe since the NFL regular season ended and 5 black coaches were fired and 3 white coaches were fired. Everybody and their mother in the woke sports era is out there making the argument the NFL is racist. Yesterday, I gave you the numbers. The fired black coaches had a 43% winning percentage. The fired white coaches had a 56% winning percentage. According to the numbers, white coaches are actually being held to a higher standard than black coaches when it comes to retaining their job. I didn't read this yesterday. I was a day behind, but I pull open the New York Times from yesterday, and this is their sports headline. This is a great example of biased journalism. And I want to share it with you because I see things like this all the time, and I think it's important to punch back when stories like this happen and say, no, this is inaccurate. You need to be covering sports from a straightforward, middle-of-the-road, honest perspective. Look at this headline. It says 32 teams. This is a headline on the New York Times yesterday. 32 teams, 2 black coaches. This is the headline, New York Times. You can see this. Sports section, New York Times yesterday. I just read it today. Major discussion going on everywhere, all right? And then it says the NFL's dedication to the Rooney Rule put to the test after a spate of firings. Now, let's begin here. This headline, 32 teams, 2 black coaches. First of all, there are 8 teams without a coach at all. So it's really 24 teams with 2 black coaches, all right? Which means that black coaches make up 8% of the NFL coaching fraternity. This is a big deal to me because we have entered into a strange world where sports is now looked at sometimes through the diversity prism. And I think focusing on diversity is absurd because what should happen is a focus on equality of opportunity, not equality of outcome. All right? And I want to give you an example from the world of sports. Ever since Jason Sehorn retired, there has not been a starting white cornerback in the NFL. 64 jobs, some of the highest paid jobs in all of sports, have gone to black guys for 15 straight years. All 64 starting cornerbacks, left and right cornerbacks, all 64 of them have been black guys for the last 15 years, okay? Black people in America represent 12% of the population. That means 12% of the population has been receiving 64 of the highest paid jobs in all of sports every year, okay? That's despite the fact that white, Asian, and Hispanic people make up 88% of the American population, and that there are many white, Hispanic, and Asian cornerbacks across the entirety of high school football. By the time you get to college, almost there are no starting white cornerbacks. I'm a big SEC football fan. I don't remember the last time there was a starting corner who was white. Now, there are safeties that are white, but I'm talking about starting cornerbacks. So it's not just the best jobs, the 64 best jobs at the cornerback position. It is the entirety of major college football, no scholarships going to white corners, okay? I have never seen anybody put a headline up that says something like 32 NFL teams, 64 black cornerbacks for 15 straight years. I wrote about this in my book, Republicans Buy Sneakers Too. And I had a mathematical professor analyze that, and he said the probability was basically infinity that should happen if the job is being open to everyone and if everyone is being treated equally. The truth of the matter is this: black people are better at playing cornerback than white people. The NFL is a meritocracy. If that were not true, then they would go out and hire the white cornerback or the Asian cornerback or the Hispanic cornerback and pay them less money, because there would be less demand for their talents, and not being racist would actually work towards the NFL team's favor, okay? This is what I would say about coaching talent. Why do we presume that coaching talent is going to reflect the population of overall coaches, of overall players in the NFL? Coaching talent is open to everyone in the country. In fact, most people who coach recognize at early ages that they aren't good enough to be professional athletes, right? Sean McVay is 34 years old, or whatever the heck he is. He went straight into coaching at 22 years old because he had no hope to ever be a pro player. Lane Kiffin started coaching while he was still an undergrad out in college because he recognized that he could not ever be an NFL player at the quarterback position. If you love football and you recognize early on that you cannot be a pro athlete because you simply are not good enough, it makes a lot of sense to immediately go into the coaching universe and bust your ass for years starting at the age of 22 to work your way up the food chain, okay? Furthermore, coaching jobs are not similar to the talents required to play a sport now. It is much more common in an analytics age for a guy who is a coach to have an analytical mind and to be the equivalent of an accountant or an executive who would be involved in private equity. It's about allocating resources, analyzing worth, figuring out how to get a competitive advantage. One of the worst competitive advantages that would exist is leaving aside the morality entirely. Being racist would make you more likely to lose football games. If you evaluate all candidates regardless of race, you can do something that I think Bill Belichick did, which is identify valuation where there is an underutilized asset. What do I mean by that? Bill Belichick went and signed a lot of white wide receivers, was able to pay them initially low amounts of money because other people, I think, looked at the white wide receiver and said, you can't do the job at a high level in the NFL. The same thing is true of white running backs. Finding an underutilized asset is a huge part of being a successful NFL franchise. If there were a collection of really talented black coaches, coordinators, GAs, position coaches, that would make it more likely for an NFL team to win, then they would all be hired, and the team that is the least racist would find a way to gain a competitive advantage. What I don't hear and discussed and analyzed enough is the fact that the NFL is the ultimate meritocracy. What matters is not equality of result. What matters is equality of opportunity. So, all of these people out there focused on, oh, the NFL's being racist, all these other things. It isn't actually true at all. Because racism, leaving aside the morality angle of it, is a poor decision in a highly competitive field because it eliminates candidates who might otherwise be really good at what they do that others might be not acknowledging because of their race. In other words, it isn't just that being racist is bad. It's that if you are not racist, you would gain a competitive advantage if the NFL was actually racist. Think about that for a minute. I think about everything in terms of competitive advantages, business advantages, and everything else. If you are fundamentally undervaluing someone because of the color of their skin, then the person who doesn't fundamentally undervalue people based on the color of their skin would sweep in and grab up all this great talent. Again, if you are arguing otherwise, what you are arguing is, for instance, oh, white corners are being discriminated against. I don't believe it. Asian corners are being discriminated against. Hispanic cornerbacks are being discriminated against. No, I don't think that's true. I think what's happening is the talent isn't there. And if the talent is not there, then you go where the talent is. It doesn't matter. In a world that is as diverse as the United States, we don't all need to have every single profession reflect everything in America. And if you doubt that, imagine that you got the wokest NFL owner of all time. And the wokest NFL owner of all time, and I write this in my book, sat down and said, I want my team to perfectly reflect the current social environment of America. Therefore, not only am I going to have a diverse team in terms of race, I'm going to have a diverse team in terms of gender. So half of my NFL team, 51% of it is going to be female. 49% of it will be male. 65% of my team will be white. 12% will be black. 14% will be Hispanic. And the rest will be Asian and other minorities. Do you know what would happen to that team? First of all, a ton of black dudes would get fired because black people represent a huge percentage of NFL players, far in excess of their 12% of the overall American population. Secondly, that team would never win. That team would never win, and they might not score all season long because they would get their brains beat in. Because having a team that perfectly reflects American society would mean that your team sucks. But it would be woke as hell. So, the key here is everyone being given a fair advantage on the playing field of life? I believe the answer is yes. Now, I think the Rooney Rule is a sham. I think the Rooney Rule exists to try to avoid headlines like these, okay? Where I think you could make an argument that the Rooney Rule would be necessary, perhaps, is when you hire at the lowest levels of coaching. Is it possible that there are talented people who would like to go into coaching that don't get access to those initial jobs? Perhaps. I wouldn't even have an issue with the NFL mandating that at the lowest levels of coaching, the GAs, the guys cutting up tape and everything else, that you have to have a minority outreach program for Asian, Hispanic, black, everybody, to make sure that you provide an entree point. But by the time you get to the very top of coaching, ultimately the people who have advanced are the cream of the crop, the people who are most likely to have actually won and been successful as coaches. So when you look at the end result, and say, why aren't there more minority coaches? First of all, the answer might be because minority coaches aren't as good. All right, that's a possibility. Equality of outcome doesn't have to happen. Secondly, it might be because minority coaches are not beginning to coach. Third, it might be because minority players also have no interest in coaching. Coaching is hard. After you've already ground away and made millions of dollars, I think it's a rare NFL player who wants to then go into coaching and work his ass off all the time. Most people are ready to retire and chill for a while. So looking at the overall racial makeup of a league and arguing that the league should reflect in high positions what the player percentage looks like is nonsensical. An NFL job as a player is a completely different job than it would be as a coach or GM. Those things often don't correspond. Sean McVay could have never made an NFL roster. Neither could Bill Belichick. They're probably the two best head coaches in football in the NFL right now. Their race has nothing to do with their success. It's because they immediately went into coaching at young ages. Share this. I think it's important. I'm the only person who's saying this. If you believe the NFL is a meritocracy, share this. Share this show. Say, hey, why don't you think about these arguments in exchange instead of seeing the same old tired, trotted out, unfair 32 teams, 2 black coaches when there's only 24 head coaches right now? Why should the head coaching jobs reflect anything else other than roughly the nation's own racial background? In other words, to me, head coaching should be 65% white, 12% black, 14% Hispanic, 6% Asian. Everybody should be able to compete for NFL head coaching jobs on an equal playing field, because you don't have to run a 4.3 40 in order to be able to do it. You don't have to be 6'5". You don't have to have a laser arm. There are limited physical requirements in order to be an NFL coach. Therefore, anybody who loves football, theoretically, should be able to rise to the level of being an NFL coach. All right, a couple of other things. Let's go to the field. Last night, Georgia got whipped by Texas, 28-21. All my timeline was filled up with people saying, oh, see how overrated the SEC is? Think about this for a minute. The standard being set for the SEC dominance is so high right now that Alabama beating the number 4 team in Oklahoma, that Florida beating the number 7 team in Michigan, that LSU beating the number 8 team in Central Florida, and that Kentucky beating the number 12 team in Penn State is all overlooked in favor of looking at number 5 Georgia losing to number 15 Texas. If you take the top 5 teams in the SEC in totality, the SEC was dominant already in bowl season. Again, beat the number 4, beat the number 7, beat the number 8, and beat the number 12 overall teams. And it lost 1 game. So against top 15 opponents in bowl season, the SEC went 4-1 with several dominating and commanding victories. In fact, the top 5 teams in the SEC actually outperformed what Vegas anticipated they were going to do. Florida was an underdog against Michigan. Kentucky was an underdog against Penn State. LSU covered. Okay? So overall, the top 5 teams in the SEC outperformed expectations. Yet the SEC has become so dominant that the number 1 storyline in all of college football now is how did the SEC do? And whatever the worst performance of an SEC school is grabbed and put forward as evidence of how bad the SEC is and how overrated they are, even though, using Vegas as its proxy, the SEC has actually outperformed the expectations that were already high that Las Vegas had put in place for the teams. Now, it's a good win for Texas. Not going to detract from that. But I do think the fact in a playoff era that the number 5 overall team has now gone 1-4 straight up when it comes to bowl season reflects that it is more crushing than in past years to lose out on an opportunity to play for a national championship. This game that Georgia put forward very much reminded me of the Sugar Bowl Alabama performance that they had in year 2 of Nick Saban after they narrowly lost to Tim Tebow and Florida, the eventual national champion. Do you remember what happened in that game? Alabama rolled down into the Sugar Bowl and got whipped 31-14 by Utah. Alabama was the better team. They did not show up and play as if that were true. And this is why Georgia didn't make the college football playoff. Why ultimately I said the College Football Playoff Committee got it right, because Georgia has gone down to the state of Louisiana twice, and in one of those games, They performed awfully on the road at LSU and got whipped. And in the other game, they played in New Orleans and they got whipped physically by Texas. Having said that, they lost by 7 points, and Jake Fromm left 14 or 20 points on the field by being awful at quarterback. He missed a wide open touchdown pass in the second quarter. He missed a huge crossing route that would have given Georgia the opportunity to score in the third quarter. You had Swift out there fumbling the ball like crazy. Georgia didn't equal the challenge provided by Texas. And so Texas deserves credit for that game. I'm already looking forward to LSU against Texas, which I believe will be second week of the season, maybe even kickoff week of the season. I'm not sure, in 2019 here in about 9 months. But the story of bowl season so far is that the SEC once again has exceeded expectations. And as a result, the South in general continues to dominate college football on an even more substantial level than it ever has before. 14 of the last 15 national champions are in SEC states. I want to repeat that because I want you to hear it. 14 of the last 15 champions are in SEC states. The only exception to that is Ohio State in 2014. In fact, in the last 4 years of the college football playoff, schools in the West, that is the Pac-12, have scored a total of 7 points. Schools north of the Mason-Dixon line have scored 3 points. Think about that for a minute. Notre Dame and the Big Ten combined in the last 4 years of the college football playoff have scored 3 points. Notre Dame and the Big Ten combined in the last 4 years. The West Coast in general has scored 7 points. All right? I am telling you right now, this is actually, I think, potentially a threat to college football in general because the SEC has become so dominant that the rest of the country doesn't even believe they can actually win championships. In fact, I thought this was interesting. ESPN put out the ratings for the college football playoff. The SEC title game this year between Georgia and Alabama had more viewers than Clemson against Notre Dame did. That's a massive, unbelievable stat that reflects how much the SEC has come to dominate college football. Let me tell you this again, because I want everybody to focus on this. It's a wild stat. Alabama against Georgia in the SEC title game this year had more viewers than, this is crazy, Clemson against Notre Dame. Everybody likes to talk about what a big national draw Clemson is on some level. Not really. Notre Dame, though, yes. All the time people talk about how Notre Dame has this huge national appeal. That game did worse than Georgia against Alabama. On top of that, you want to talk money? ESPN paid $200 million to air Clemson against Notre Dame. You know what CBS paid to air the SEC title game? $3.4 million. CBS paid $3.4 million to outdraw a game put on ESPN that cost $200 million. It's wild from a financial perspective. All right, here are those numbers, by the way. Where does the audience come from that watches the college football playoff? Here was the Orange Bowl between Alabama and Oklahoma. Birmingham, Alabama is the nation's college football capital. It produces insane numbers. But Birmingham, Tulsa, Oklahoma, and Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, because Oklahoma was playing, I consider Oklahoma to be a southern state. You can argue it's a southwestern state. Some idiots will argue it's a western state. Some even dumber people will argue it is a northern state. I'm curious right now on Facebook and on Twitter, where would you guys rank, classify Oklahoma? To me, Oklahoma is a southern state. That is, Oklahoma people look towards the south to define themselves as part of Texas effectively. I also consider Texas to be a southern state. All right, you guys can give all of your opinions there as to what geographic region you would consider yourselves to be in. Oklahomans can also come out and say exactly what they think. Frankly, I believe anyone saying Midwest is insane. I also think anybody saying anything other than South or Southwest is insane. I think Oklahoma and Texas are united at the hip. Texas is the South, and so is Oklahoma, all right? Fourth biggest market, Greenville, South Carolina, which is the biggest city closest to Clemson. Then Nashville, Knoxville, Columbus, Ohio, New Orleans, Atlanta, and Jacksonville. All southern markets watching Alabama primarily play against Oklahoma, with the exception of Columbus, Ohio, which is a lot more in common because Ohio State is there with the South than everywhere else. What about the Cotton Bowl? Birmingham, Greenville, South Carolina, Oklahoma City, New Orleans, Tulsa, Columbus, Ohio, Nashville, Tennessee, Knoxville, Tennessee, Dayton, Ohio, and Atlanta. When you really look at where the heartbeat of college football is, it's the 11-state SEC region, Oklahoma, which I consider to basically be a southern state, and Ohio. That's the heartbeat of college football, all right? The 11-state SEC footprint plus Oklahoma plus Ohio. It's a very regional audience. I think this is not necessarily ideal for college football because the Northeast is not tuning in and the West Coast is not tuning in. I think you can make an argument. I think you can make an argument that college football has become akin somewhat to hockey, where if you live in a particular part of the country, in the Midwest, the North, where hockey is popular, or in Canada, hockey is insanely popular. Everywhere else, it's the SEC states, it's Oklahoma, and it's Ohio. That's where people care about college football in this country. All right? Finally, I want to congratulate LSU on their national championship. A lot of people thought Ed Orgeron was not going to go to LSU and ever win a national championship. I'll put myself into that category. And certainly I didn't think Ed Orgeron was going to go to LSU and win a national championship faster than Nick Saban did at LSU. But you know what happened yesterday? LSU lined up against the national champion, defending undefeated national champion, UCF Golden Knights, or whatever the heck they're called, UCF Black Knights. What are they? The UCF Knights. And they took it to them. LSU took the man's belt. They took the belt from UCF. They beat them by a lot, even more than the score reflected. Outgained them by 300 yards. That's despite the fact that LSU had a bunch of Kappa Sigs from the intramural team playing in the secondary against UCF. To be the man, you got to beat the man, and LSU is the man. LSU already locked up one part of the national championship this year. I look forward to attending the victory parade in Baton Rouge. Maybe they'll also take over Disney World. If I were LSU, I would put a big banner up in my stadium congratulating my team on their national championship. Again, when you beat the defending national champions and they haven't lost a game, Ed Orgeron and LSU deserve to be commended. Big-time title winning, big-time statement game by LSU in getting that national championship and yanking it away from Central Florida as they tried to go for a repeat. By the way, more seriously, Joe Burrow, incredible performance coming back from that decking that he took on an interception. LSU fell behind 14-3 and then kicked ass the rest of the way. Like I said, outgained their opponents by over 300 yards. Somebody just saw it. I saw it in the mentions. As we go out and finish off today's show, I want to say rip to my man, Mean Gene Okerlund. I grew up a child of the WWF. I loved the WWF back in the day. I hate to see all of the wrestlers that I grew up idolizing dying off one by one. Mean Gene Okerlund was an American original. Rest in peace to Mean Gene Okerlund. Also, Tyler Trent, the Purdue fan who died and inspired many of us with his courageous fight against cancer, with his willingness to embrace his favorite team in college football, and also just his sheer courage, strength, humility, and ability to unite so many different people across the landscape of college football. He represents everything that was the best for the sport. Props to Scott Van Pelt for bringing his story to the nation. If you haven't read it, good job by the Music City Bowl bringing him down for the Purdue-Auburn game. I'm getting a little bit emotional even thinking about it now. May even be able to see it a little bit. When you get to be a dad, this is one of the tough things about being a dad. When you get to be a dad, a parent in any way, you don't think as much about yourself. And now when I see young guys or girls going through what he was going through, I think about it from the perspective of the parent more than I think about it from the perspective of the kid. That kid was incredibly strong. Prayers to his family for their strength and their support of their son throughout a long battle with cancer. If you can do something to help in his continuing and ongoing quest to fight that awful scourge, I would encourage you guys to do it. Props to Tyler, Trent, and everything that he represented for the best of college football as we begin 2019. I love all of you, boys and girls. DBAP unless you need to SBAP. This has been Outkick the Show. I'll be live on Lock It In on FS1, 4:30 Eastern, 3:30 Central, 2:30 Mountain, 1:30 Pacific. Todd Furman is kicking my ass with gambling picks. I got to bounce back. I got to be honest with you. I'm taking it on the chin right now. Love all of you. This has been Outkick the Show. Go share it with your friends. I love all of you. Kisses. Like I said, DBAP unless you need to SBAP. See y'all. Love you. Thank you, Facebook.